Hi patrons. So, I'm going to be talking about some DNFs and a book that I had issues with in the month of April. Now, I don't think I'm going to have any more DNFs this month, or I don't think so, because I've been reading mostly the same author, and I like that author, so I'm hoping I don't have any duds with her. So the first one, this one here I brought with me for my Vegas trip, and I didn't end up reading it while I was in Vegas. So I was like, well, let me get through it for the month of April just to be done with it, you know? So I ended up DNFing Allie Hazelwood's Deep End. Now this one here, I guess if you read Allie Hazelwood and you like her writing, then this book here is probably the most sexual that you probably have come across when it comes to Allie Hazelwood. But I would say, like, if you are a romance fan and you read a lot of smut or, you know, sex on page romances, delving into this is, like, I would say mediocre. It's very mediocre. I don't like Allie Hazelwood's writing. This is something I'm like, I've 2 books now that I've tried to get through. I don't like them. Mainly because a lot of the characters she goes and creates, she tries to act like that they're really so, like, sophisticated and so smart and things like that, and it just come up with these big words like the character, which I don't remember now her name, her name's Scarlet, I think. Scarlet, yeah, Scarlet, that's her name. The character of Scarlet is talking with her teammate Penn about Penn and the male, what was his name again? Lucas, I think it was Lucas, about their sexual exploits and all that stuff. And Lucas is into more of a BDSM type of thing, but I'd say it was more light. I mean, when you look at it, because it's like, oh, like they were doing doggy style, and it's like, that to me is like not BDSM. That's just a different sex position, which isn't bad. So I was like, okay. And then, oh, well, he likes to, this, and to me, it's like, that's another thing in sex where that has nothing to do with BDSM. So the other thing was, oh, well, he likes to hold her wrists, and it's like, again, that's not really, I would see BDSM, I don't consider it that. You can have a kink. You can have a kink in a relationship, but I'd still consider it more on the soft side. Like, was he restraining her down to where she couldn't move? That's like a different thing. Then that's going into BDSM. It's just so funny how you have like these authors that are like, hey, I'm going to do BDSM. And it's more of like, this shit's light. This is like barely anything that you would be concerned with, like, it's like tee-heat. And I'm just like, girl, you must be into like really vanilla sex to where the lights are off. You don't see this person. None of that. I mean, if that's the way you connect with your partner that way, okay. But, maybe I'm a little bit more adventurous than I thought. But, to me, I was just reading this and I'm just like, how is this like anything really like high kink? It just really wasn't. It was very much like, I would say, a letdown. So when I talk about the language, I would say Allie Hazelwood, in a way, kind of reminds me of Penny Reed. I don't like Penny Reed either, because it's very much like the language, the way it is, where they try to, she tries to act like her characters are like super smart and everything like that. Where one of the words that I was like, what college kid is using this fucking word? I said this to my husband. I'm reading the book and I'm just like, have you ever heard any college kid in your life say counterintuitive? Or what was the other one? I think it was counterintuitive. And I'm like, what college kid do you know that's saying that? That's having this conversation with this college girl. I mean, you're talking, these people are like, what, 21, 20? What do they know about kink? The kink community, It just, the author there tries to act like that her characters are like these smart super geniuses and all this stuff, and they just know like all this stuff with life. And I'm like, but these people are in their early 20s. Like, obviously you don't want to make the characters like complete dumbasses, but college kids are not saying counterintuitive and all this other shit word salad that you throw into this book. And this is my problem that I have with Allie Hazelwood. And this is why I never delved into deeply with Penny Reed either, because Penny Reed made me feel stupid reading her books. And so when I'm reading this, I'm just like, this is like women's fiction shoved into a romance. That's basically what it is. I didn't feel the connection at all with these characters. I don't feel the connection. You don't feel like a romantic relationship with these two. So anyways, Scarlett was talking with, her teammate Penn. And then Penn is like, after she breaks up with her boyfriend Lucas because she wasn't into like the same stuff that he was into in the bedroom, right? Because he's a dirty talker. He likes to do things like, oh, do you like that? Oh, you're going to take that like a good girl for me. Things like that, sayings like this, stuff like that. Praise, he's into praise, and she's not into that, like Penn wasn't into like him talking and praising her during the bedroom. She was not into that. Which is fine, not everybody's into like praise kink, not everybody, like for me, I'm like, I would say like, I'm not against it for myself, but also, I don't know how I would feel if some dude was calling me good girl in the bedroom. Like if my husband started saying that to me, I don't know how I would feel about that. I'd probably say, dude, can you shut up? Can you shut up? I don't know how I would feel about that, because I'm just like, it's a word that gets used constantly that I'm so tired of. And I'm like, you can do other words of like praise to your partner, that type of thing, without using good girl. I'm sorry. It gets so redundant and just repetitive. And I'm tired of the repetitive nature of it. So with this, it's like, I don't feel like a romantic connection between these characters. I feel like this is more of a women's fiction shoved into a romance, and then you have like sex scenes involved in it. So I'm like, I don't know. I just really don't feel like it's a romance. I don't really feel that Allie Hazelwood is a romance author. She obviously is attempting to try to be, but I just don't feel it, Like there are different authors that have that style of writing where it's a romantic way of, building up the relationship, and you can feel it. You could feel it coming out of the pages. And I just didn't feel it with this book. And it got to about chapter 4 where I'm like, I cannot stand this author's writing. I don't like her writing. And so I literally skimmed the rest of the book and delving into the sex scenes to see like, Is it like high kink? Nah, this shit is so lukewarm. Nothing really to it. It really isn't, you know? Someone in their early 20s may be like, oh my God, oh my God. But for me, I'm just like, no, girl. Like, no, girl. This is nothing. This is nothing. This is barely anything, you know? So, yeah, to me, I was not feeling this book at all. And I'm like, you know what? Allie Hazelwood is not the author for me. I've tried 2 of her books, and 2 of them I've DNF'd. I cannot get through a whole fucking book of hers because I don't like her writing style. I don't like her writing style. Like I said, it feels way too much like women's fiction to me. And then you have like sex scenes thrown in to, you know, and then like, oh, well, it's a romance. And I'm like, no, it isn't, you know, like there are ways to write a book to where it feels like a romance. You can feel the connection with the characters. And I just don't feel it with this. You know, just didn't feel it with this book. And so I'm like, no, my curiosity's, you know, slacked or whatever it is, you know, my curiosity is done when it comes to this author. I've read 2 books from hers and 2, not a fan. Not a fan, don't like this author's writing. And I'm just like, nah, I'm done. I'm not going to try another book from this author. I'm good to go. So the next book I could not get into, and I was actually listening to this on audio, but I couldn't get into it, and I ended up like returning it to my library, was The Lady He Lost by Faye Delacour. I had this on a physical copy of this, and I was not feeling this author's writing either. Like, it was just very boring to me. It had to do with this guy where he was pronounced dead, even though they never had his body, they never recovered his body. He was supposedly lost at sea, but he had said he came back 2 years later, and he said that he had gotten kidnapped by pirates. His best friend there was a female, and she doesn't believe him that he got like kidnapped by pirates. So I'm kind of like, you're his friend and yet you don't believe his story? Okay, lady. And it just was like, I could not get into the story. You know, it was like I started almost falling asleep listening to the audiobook because I'm just like, this is boring to me. There's really not, you know, like there are certain authors that you have to, different types of writers or authors, you know, it takes them a while to kind of like get their audience to warm up to the book to where that you could finally start enjoying it. I'm that type of reader where you have to connect me right away within the first chapter. You got to connect me. You've got to draw your reader in, your audience in within the first or second chapter. If you're not doing that, you're not a good enough author. You are not a good enough author to engage with your audience, you know, like, and there's some people who are like, oh, well, the readership nowadays where people are looking for quick, easy reads and all that stuff. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with quick, easy reads if that's what you're looking for, you know? But there are some authors that they have a way of like, even if it's a long story, they have a way of drawing you in as a reader and capturing you to where it doesn't matter if it's a 600-page book. If you're captivated by that story, you can keep reading. But if you're not captivated by the story, you're going to get bored and you're going to want to move on to something else. And so since I'm that type of reader where I'm like, look, I'm not going to go and read this whole book, and it's not until maybe like midway through or mostly through where I'm like, oh, now I'm starting to enjoy the book. No, you need to engage me within the first 2 or 3 chapters. And if you can't do that, if it's taking you too long for you to, you know, do the world building and all that stuff, I'm fucking out. I'm out and I'm moving on to something else. I don't have time for this, you know, time for you to do your slow ass coming up to, you know, what's going on, you know? So that's what it was with this author where I'm like, I'm not feeling this author's writing. It's taking too long to get to somewhere. And so within the 4 chapters, I was like, I'm bored. I'm absolutely bored. I don't care what's going on in these people's lives. You know, you need to draw in, like I said, it needs to be a way you have to draw in the reader. And there are authors that can do that for me, that will draw me in within the first or second chapter. And you can go and be there when the buildup, happens in the story, with the characters. This one here, I was like, I don't feel the connection between them two. Like, obviously with him, he was, he looked at her in a romantic way, and it's like, well, why didn't you go for her then? You were engaged to, like, her friend. So I don't understand why I'm like, oh, you're attracted to her, but you didn't go for her. It just made no sense to me. And then she doesn't believe that he had gotten kidnapped by pirates. And I'm like, well, if he supposedly is your friend, wouldn't you want to believe him right away? So it seems kind of weird, like, that you wouldn't believe him, and he supposedly is your friend. And I'm like, do you have a reason why you would not believe him? Like, is he prone to lying? I mean, I just was like, I don't get this. So yeah, I ended up, like, DNFing it, and I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. I don't like this author's writing. It's not drawing me in. And I was just like, no, I'm good. So the last book I'm going to talk about, this one I actually finished reading. Now, I would say this author's writing is good, but, I really think if there was an editor for this book, this editor did this author dirty, because there was a lot of plot points to this story that I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why can't you stick to just one plot of the story? Why is there all this other shit, So I think this author could have gotten more books done, but either the author herself didn't want to listen to any critiques to her story and edit the story to make it better, or the editor for this author's books did this author dirty. Either way, this author did not get past book 3, when it came to her writing. So I read Olivia Parker to Wed a Wicked Earl. Now, this is the second book in the series. Now, if you watched my vlog, I had read the first book in the series. It had to do with the bride hunt ball, or whatever it was. So this one here is the second one, where it has the heroine from the first book. Her friend, Charlotte, is in the second book. So we got the character of Charlotte Green and Adam Bastian Aubrey Fairmont. He's the Earl of Rothbury. He went by Rothbury the whole fucking time, this book. So I ended up giving this a 3. I'd say it's probably like between like a 2.5, between a 3. 2.5 definitely, because there was a lot of shit in here I was getting so annoyed with. So I said, there's so much wrong with this book. If a proper editor had actually worked on this book and the author listened, then the author did this author dirty. I said, so Charlotte Green was rejected in the first book in the series, so she decides to ask for help from Rothbury to make Tristan jealous, whom she had a crush on in the first book. So Rothbury agrees to it. Then we have another plot point in here where this whole entire book, Rothbury has been secretly in love with Charlotte. And in the first book, when he was chasing after Madeline, Charlotte's friend, the heroine in the first book, and Lady Rosalind, he was only doing it because he didn't want Charlotte to know that he really wanted her and not them. Yeah. Does that sound right to you? So I said, does that make any sense at all? I said, seriously, what was the freaking point of that? I said, it made him look like a complete dumbass. And why would he torture himself that way? Why give your friend Tristan a shot at her when you have been secretly in love with her for years? It made no sense. I said, he thought he wasn't good enough for the heroine. I said, it was such bullshit. I said, so Charlotte couldn't make up her own mind and decide who she wants? It made no sense. I'm like, so he's been in love with her for 4 years, and he allows his friend Tristan Lady Rosalind, to add Charlotte onto the list of potential brides who Tristan could marry. Because the Duke in the first book didn't want to marry, but he ended up getting married to Madeline, in the first book. So Tristan was engaged at the end of book 1. In this book here, Tristan's bride-to-be ended up crying off, so he was free as a bird again. And he was basically telling Rothbury, that's what I wanted in the first place. I never wanted to get married. And so Rothbury was letting his friend have a shot at her. And then he was basically saying, like, in the book, she's got a crush on my best friend, so I can't go for it. And I'm like, are you kidding, man? Are you fucking kidding? Women love the chase. Women like to see a man who fights for them. And you don't want to fight for her at all? Because she's got a crush, a stupid crush, on your friend? Come on, dude. Oh my God. I was just like, seriously? Seriously. As it then Rothbury decides to meet up with a former lover in the library since he can't have Charlotte. He's like, I'll get my dick wet with this other chick, that I've slept with before. And I'm like, While everyone at the ball is dancing, including Charlotte. Don't go for this one that I've been in love with for years. No, I'm going to go and hook up with this crazy bitch that I hooked up with before. So he decides while he's in the library not to sleep with her, not go forward with it because he's, in love with Charlotte. So as revenge, the woman ties him up and leaves him there. Charlotte finds Rothbury there and kisses him. He's blindfolded and he doesn't know who it was who kisses him, though he smells lemons, right? And he has smelled lemons on Charlotte before. So yeah, who was the person kissing him? Gee, I wonder. Where he's like, who was the woman who kissed me? When you smell lemons and the lemons remind you of Charlotte. I just was like, are you kidding me? Then another plot of the story has Rosalind plotting with Tristan, so Rothbury gets jealous when Tristan is flirty and talks with Charlotte. I said, seriously? Why did this plot need to be in the book? It made no sense. The guy's in love with Charlotte. So Lady Rosalind is trying to get Rothbury with Charlotte? Because she's like, you could clearly see he's in love with her. Well, then why don't you have a talk with Rothbury and say, dude, instead of trying to chase after me, when I know you're not interested in me, chase after Charlotte. Why do you keep chasing after me? You know I'm not interested in you. You deep down are not interested in me, because I could tell. So why aren't you chasing after Charlotte? Get some fucking balls. Oh my God. Then there's another plot of the story that takes place where Rothbury has Charlotte come to his home and meet his grandmother, who speaks mostly French. And he makes his grandmother believe that they are engaged. So Charlotte and Rothbury do a fake marriage, which then turns into a real marriage after the priest sends Rothbury a letter in the mail telling Rothbury that him and Charlotte are actually married. Then after Charlotte and Rothbury finally have sex, I said almost toward the end of the book, in a carriage, Rothbury's former lover decides to kidnap Charlotte at the 97% point of the fucking book. 97% in the book, we had a kidnapping. And I was like, huh? Why the fuck are we having a kidnapping at this point of the book? Wouldn't you have a kidnapping maybe like around the 70 or 80% point? Not the 97% point? Then Rothbury gets her back quickly. They find out that they actually aren't legally married. And at the end, they get married. It was like... Oh, God. I said, there wasn't any plot of this story that stayed on the path until the end. almost like the author didn't know which direction she wanted to take this book. Hence why I said that if a competent editor actually looked over this book, he or she could have told the author to cut out some of these other plots and stick to the main one. I said this book could have been good if the story went like this. So this was my way of how they could have had the story. Angry that Charlotte spent all of her time pining over a man who didn't want her, she goes and asks Rothbury if he can help her find a husband. Rothbury, feeling rejected by Lady Rosalind, decides to help Charlotte find a husband. But while he is helping her, he starts to fall for Charlotte and decides that he wants her to be his bride. That could have been the story of what we were going with. Because then we could have had it to where they're bitter toward the beginning. They decide, let's work together to kind of make these two jealous. And while they're working together, they could have started falling for each other. That would have made a totally better story. You know, because like I said, the author isn't a bad author. You know, because I was intrigued with the story. But it was the plot points, multiple plot points that just didn't make sense to me. Why go in this direction for a little bit and then, oh, that direction's gone. Let's go into this direction now. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And no, let's go into this direction. Oh, no, we got to go in this direction too. It made no sense. So I said, if the author still wanted to add a kidnapping plot from a jilted ex-lover, that would have been fine, but not at the 97% point of the book. Maybe around the 85% point she could have done that. Or I say 70% around there. This book was a huge mess, and as I stated, if a proper editor was actually used and implemented, then this book could have been way better. And that's how I kind of felt like when it came to the first story too. Like, for the most part, I liked the first book, but there were multiple things in it that I had issues with, and I couldn't really put my finger fully on why I had issues with the first book. By the second book, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like blatant, you know? This is blatant. This author can't stick to a fucking storyline. You can usually have, when it comes to a romance, there's usually the main plot, which is told all throughout the story. You can have like a secondary plot point put in that's more of a minor plot point, so that way it doesn't take away from the main plot of the story. That's fine. You can do that. But it was like no direction that she could go with when it came to the story. So like I said, if a proper editor was put in place and the author actually listened to the editor, it could have been, a lot of that stuff could have been trimmed out, and they could have told the author, stick to this main plot. This is what you want to do. You want to stick to this main plot of the story and kind of work your way from there. And like I said, my synopsis of how I felt like it could have went, it would have been a much better story, because then you could have gotten, okay, these two are both jilted by these people that they wanted to marry. But while they're trying to jilt the other person, they realize that they're falling for each other, and they realize, wow, what they have is actually love. What they were feeling for the other people wasn't really feeling love. Now they actually are feeling love with these characters. That would have made more sense. And then, like I said, you could have had a side plot of maybe like all of a sudden his ex-lover comes in the picture and is like, you know, oh, I want to be with you. And he's like, no, I don't want to be with you. And then she could have like been where she's like, oh, well, I'm going to go and get back at him. I'm going to kidnap, you know, this woman that he's falling for. And that would have made more sense, because then it's like, oh, he's showing his love by rescuing the heroine, you know? And that's how he shows his love. That could have culminated, I'm trying to say it. That could have culminated, is that what it is? Culminated to a better, like, wrap up to the point of like him saying to her, or say that could have been the how I want to say it, that could have been like the tipping point of him expressing his love to her, is like maybe after he rescues her, he's like, oh, I love this woman, you know? And so he verbally expresses to her, I love you. That would have made more sense to the story, you know? So yeah, there's certain things where they just don't make sense, you know? And too much of this story was a lot of like different plots that were going at the same time, and it just like made no sense to me, you know? So that's pretty much it for this video here. I wanted to mention that there was I did a video where I talked about historical romance, and I had talked how I thought that, you know, I had said like when I say like something's too modern in a historical romance, I mean like storylines just don't make any sense. Like when it comes to the history that we know, when it came to like women and all that stuff, women back in the day, you know, didn't own land, they didn't own they didn't own businesses, property, different things like that. Every now and again, maybe there's a rare instance where you hear of a story of this woman, you know, who maybe owned a business or whatever it is. Like, oh, there was a trailer for this movie that I think it's French or something like that. I think it's a French movie or something like that, or Italian, where it was this woman who married this guy who I guess had vineyards and created wine, and her husband ended up dying, and so she took over the business, and she was she owned the business, and she wanted to basically expand the business and make it, you know, better and all that stuff. And so it was going through adversity because people didn't want to take her seriously because she's a woman who owned a winery. So they basically wanted to take it over for her. And so I saw this trailer for the movie, and it looked pretty good. That's fine. If you go and have a historical romance where, say, it's kind of based on a real story, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But like I said, when it comes to diversity, I don't mean race. That's not what I mean. I don't mean race or anything like that. There are certain historical romances where, say, maybe like it's a gay couple and they're open in their relationship and everybody accepts them. That to me doesn't make any sense, because it has taken the gay community many years to get accepted into, I'd say, public society, where for many years in history, gay men, gay women were condemned. They were put in mental asylums. So, I mean, when I mean, you know, if you're going to do a historical romance with like gay characters and stuff like that, have it make sense to where maybe they had to keep their relationship a secret, you know, or they lived in this small little town to where the people in the town knew they were gay, but they were okay with it. That type of thing. That would make sense. Or say like with the story where I talked about when it came to the heroine, for this, it was an actual real story where this woman took over her husband's business and was trying to continue keeping her winery around and basically get it famous, you know. Do a story like that. That makes sense to me, because then it's like you can see you could see the adversity that she's going through, the people who don't want her in that position, that type of thing. Have a story like that. That makes more sense to me than, say, a heroine. She's like, oh, she's an heiress. She doesn't need to get married. And she could pretty much be a single woman. There were single women back in that time. There were women who, they died single. They were not married. You know, I mean, look at Jane Austen, for example. I don't believe Jane Austen ever got married or anything like that. She didn't have any children. So, I mean, she was able to survive on either her books or her family or whatever it is. So she was able to survive on that. But also, back in the day, a lot of people did not live very long lives. You know, when you want to talk about during like the 1800s, 1700s, there was a lot of diseases back then, you know? So, I mean, we have a lot of things now where, you know, we go and we get like shots and all that stuff to help you stop from getting like polio and all these, you know, we have all these different vaccines now to help prevent us from dying of like tuberculosis. I mean, back in the day that was called, what was it, consumption? Back in the day it was called that, but it was basically tuberculosis. Like if you ever watched the movie Moulin Rouge, that's what Satine, her character, that's what she died of. She died of tuberculosis. So back in the day, you know, you could die of like different diseases and stuff like that, where now we have like vaccines for it and all that stuff. Like every 10 years or so, you get like a tetanus shot and all that stuff, you know, that type of thing. You go and get a TB shot to prevent you from getting tuberculosis, prevent you from, I mean, now my kids, I mean, they got vaccines for like, they won't ever get chickenpox. I got chickenpox back in the day. Years later now, I am susceptible to getting, shingles. I can get shingles now, which I heard is very painful. There was someone I knew that had gotten shingles, and he said, yeah, you're in a lot of pain. So, I mean, stories like that, you know, like if it's something like that, like an author wants to write this story of a woman who owns a winery, and they could say, oh, this is based on an actual story that happened. That makes sense to me. But if it's something to where it's like, oh, well, this minority couple didn't deal with any type of adversity at all. And I'm like, that just makes no sense to me, you know, because it has happened, you know, stuff like that has happened. That's what I mean by diversity. So people like, there was somebody who had commented on my video when I was talking about historical romances, you know, that stuff are too modern. Someone had, you know, blatantly wanted to make sure that they put in, oh, African-American Beverly Jenkins. And I'm like, I know Beverly Jenkins is an African-American. I'm not saying that. When I mentioned her name, I had said to them that, yeah, I like Beverly Jenkins. And, you know, I have no problem with what her race is. My thing was, she's one of the authors that did not get her contract renewed. So I had said if she wants to continue her historical romances, she has a way of doing it. She can go and instead of traditionally publishing her books, she can independently publish her books, or go through a small indie press you're still independent, but you still have it's a small indie press, so they're helping you distribute your books. So that's what I mean by that. So I think somebody wanted to blatantly put out that, oh, she's an African American, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, I'm not meaning it in a derogatory way when I mention her as an author. I had met, you know, I didn't embellish and say I mentioned her name because she was one of the authors that did not get her contract renewed for traditional publishing. But there are, you know, all different diverse type of authors that I read, whether historical or contemporary. It doesn't matter to me their race, you know, like I don't care what their race is. I don't care what their sexuality is. If they read a good book, I'm reading it. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care what they identify as, you know. I don't care what their religion is, or if they don't have a religion. As long as they're not mocking or being disrespectful in some way of other people's like beliefs, religions, sexualities, and all that stuff, I don't have a problem with it. You know, I think we all should get along with each other and not fight, because it's just stupid, you know, and shallow to fight with someone over like their sexual preference or their religious beliefs, or, you know, if they have any type of like bias or bigotry, you know, that type of thing. And so there was another person who had commented and wanted to educate me. And I know those types of people. I know those particular types of people that love to come in and to educate different people. And for me, I'm like, no, I'm sorry. A hate comment, to me, hate comments and lectures from my audience will get you muted really quick. Whether it's a hate comment or it's you trying to lecture me, that will get you muted really fast, because it's just really annoying to me. Because to me, I'm like, look, if I really am bigoted, if I really am an Istarphobe or whatever it is, you lecturing me is not going to teach me anything at all. So it really, I find it very infuriating when I have people who come into my comment section and think they want to lecture me because maybe I'm not saying things the right way, or I say, well, I don't like to read my historical novels with this type of stuff in it. To me, I'm like, it needs to make sense to me. And like, as I stated before, those types of stories, like if I read like that type of story, you know, when it came to like that woman owning the winery after her husband died and all that stuff, that would make sense to me. That would totally make sense to me, because I know there are women out there back in the day who were challenging the status quo or challenging the system, you know, whatever the system is, you know, they were challenging it. If you think that we live under a patriarchy, then they were challenging the patriarchy, if that's what you want to define it as. I don't put it that way because I don't truly think that we live under a patriarchy. Not anymore. I do feel like women have broken the glass ceiling. Women can, you know, buy property. They can work for themselves. They can go and work for a business. They can vote. They have all kinds of rights. You know, like in the United States, they have all kinds of rights. I feel like women in the United States have broken the glass ceiling. Maybe in other countries, women have not done so yet. But I hope one day that they will, and have their choices, you know, that they want. So that's what I mean when it comes to like diversity and all that stuff. And there's people who are like, you know, kind of like assuming I meant race. And I'm like, no. I read Stacey Reed. She's a black author that writes white characters, you know, which I have no problem with. If she wanted to write black characters, I wouldn't have a problem with. I like her writing. I like Stacey Reed as an author. Do I, you know, if I wanted to identify myself as a character, do I identify myself with the white characters? Yeah. But I mean, I don't really identify myself when it comes to a character. I'm not putting myself in these characters' shoes. I'm watching a movie in my head. So I may look at the character and be like, well, the character is completely different from me, like visually, but I can identify with the character in a way of maybe like I could sympathize with them or empathize with that character. That's what, you know, that's what I do mainly. You know, when it comes to when I read books, I could feel empathy, I could feel compassion for this person. It doesn't matter whether they're the same race as me or not. You know, and I think, you know, that's a more open way of reading, you know. Some people, I think they kind of like close themselves off and only read a certain way, and they only want to identify with those particular characters. So if anybody looks differently than them, they don't want to read those types of stories. And I'm like, that's kind of like, I don't know, you're really closing yourself off to all different types of books, you know? So this is why for me, I don't self-insert, you know? I don't self-insert when it comes to reading these books. I look at it as I'm watching a movie. I'm just the fly on the wall, you know, that type of thing. And I certainly could have empathy or compassion and sympathy for any of the characters I read. It all depends on what type of life journey they go through, you know? So that's what I mean when it comes to different stuff. But there's some people who just, I think some people assume, some people make assumptions, you know, and they, you know what they say, like when you make an assumptions, you make an ass out of you, you know, pretty much. That's pretty much how it is. So yeah, when I talk about diversity and stuff, I mean like more that, you know, more that type, those types of things. But yeah, like I said, there was one person who wanted to lecture me in my comment, and I'm just like, no, mute. I'm not being lectured. And another person who I think made that assumption. And then when I had expanded on my, what I was talking about, they were like, oh, I didn't know that. So it just kind of like shut down their, I think shut down their line of thinking. I was assuming that's what they were thinking, just based on like how they gave me the comment, you know? It all depends on how you, it depends on how you say things, you know? Like, you may not mean it in a mean way, but it could come off as mean. It can come off as very like being very defensive. So yeah, I think you have to, you got to choose your words wisely and all that stuff, you know? And sometimes I would say for me, I have to like correct myself and say, well, I didn't mean it like this. I meant it this way. Because some people assume, you know, they assume, they jump the gun and all that stuff, and they automatically like put you in a box. And that's one thing I don't want to be in. I never want to be in. I never want to be put in a box and people only know me for this particular thing. And it's like, no, I am what you would say multifaceted. I have many different points, many different things, many different opinions. Just because my opinion doesn't align with yours for a particular subject, it doesn't mean that you have to disregard everything else I say. And this is the problem a lot with today's society, is a lot of people will do that. Put everybody in boxes. I don't agree with that. I don't think it's the right way to go along in society, you know? A lot of like misconceptions and you know, ways of people, how they think, very close-mindedness. I don't want to be portrayed that way, you know? So yeah, sometimes, you know, there's certain things are kind of like hard for me to say, and so it's like I sometimes I try my best to get to my point, sometimes I don't, you know? So yeah, anyways, that's basically what I was talking about. It just kind of go off on another kind of tangent of like, you know, something I saw recently when it came to that video is like some people making assumptions and really kind of like showing themselves, you know, showing, you know, how they are as a person. And I just don't like that. I don't like it when people make assumptions about me or assume that I am this way because of maybe like what the color of my skin or whatever it is. It just, if it's the other way around, would you like that? You know, would you like that done to you? If you were this particular color or that particular color, would you want people to make assumptions about you? So, you know, to me, it's like the whole thing about respect. You know, you respect me, I respect you back. Treat me the way you want to be treated. You know, if you're going to disrespect me, then don't expect me to be kind to you back. And that's lately what I've been doing when it comes to like different comments where I, the way I interpret them based on how you comment to me, Yeah, if I feel like you know, your comment is a threat or it's a lecture and you're doing it in a way of like trying to talk down to me, you know, that is one way to get yourself muted. I don't want to be treated like I'm a child and you think that you can lecture me or put me in a box and, you know, treat me, like I said, treat me like a child, treat me like a baby, treat me like I'm some, you know, idiot, you know? That really fucking pisses me off. That will really irritate me. And I get to that point where I'm just like, done. You're done. Your first comment to me means everything. That's basically your first introduction to me, you know? It's like talking with somebody face to face. Your first impression of that person is going to be everything. And if your first impression of you know, my first impression of you is you coming into my comment section and harassing me, being bigoted toward me, or thinking of lecturing me, you know, leaving me a hate comment, being nasty, I'm done, you know? I'm fucking done. So I will fucking mute you. I will mute you and I will have it to where you don't see any of my stuff, you know? I mute the person and I have them to where nothing gets recommended from my channel, you know? I mute them from my channel and that's pretty much it. I'm like, bye, gone. You're out. I'm not putting up with abuse. I will not put up with abuse, disrespect. No. You know, if somebody goes and they want to edit a comment or reword it or whatever it is, or if I go and say something back to them and maybe like they comment again saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. Okay, I can understand. But first impressions, yeah, they're very important to me. And if you come across as like nasty and I'm looking at that comment as like, oh, you think that you're better than me. Okay, I don't need to put up with this. This is why I said like there's certain videos that I want to promote or put on my Patreon because I don't want them public. Because there are people who can come into your comment section and they're like lurkers, you know? They come in, leave something nasty to you, and then they're out. And they don't even want to watch any more videos from you. But they'll leave you that nasty comment. So this is why for me, I'm like, I leave my Patreon to the people who actually support me, who actually take the time to watch my videos. You know, watch all my videos, you know, or most of my videos if you don't watch all of them. You like my content, you know, so you might be more open to different things I have to say. And maybe you don't completely agree with everything that I say, which is understandable. I may not agree with everything you say, but you still can be my friend. And that's basically what it is. My Patreon is for my friends online, you know, the people who care, give a shit what I have to say, you know, that type of thing. But anyways, that's pretty much it for this video here. My child has these. I try not to eat a lot of candy because of my diabetes, but I do have snacks and stuff like that. The one thing that will help with like a sugar craving that I found is instead of like a sweet like chocolate, you can do fruit. I find a lot, like if I eat like a good amount of fruit, which I do, it handles a lot of my sugar cravings. So, but every now and again, I'll eat like you know, a little candy. And this is fine. Like, it's a small, you know, candy bar instead of like the whole candy bar, you know? So I'll snack on something like that where it's like, it's tiny. So it's easier for me. But anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. Like I said, I know I'm not going to be for everybody. And, you know, if you disagree with me, that's fine. You can disagree with me. I prefer, instead of a lecture, instead of this person coming at me with like a hate comment, you come at me with respect and say, you know, with respect, blah, 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 you know, and you can go and disagree with me, and that's fine, you know, and I may not agree with you, but we could still be respectful, you know? We could still come at each other with, you come at this person with love and respect and not hate and, you know. It so irritates me. I've just been seeing stuff lately where it's like both sides, you know? I've been seeing like these two sides just kind of like, you know, pinging off with each other. It's like, it's rage bait. They're trying to get people to fight with each other. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I just think like there are ways that you could talk to somebody and you may not respect them fully, but you could respect their opinion. And you can go and, you know, at the end of the day, be like, okay, we disagree and that's fine, but we can walk away without like hating each other or causing like this huge like hatred, you know? Yeah. I've been seeing stuff in the news lately and I just like, no, this is rage bait. This is rage bait. They want people to fight with each other, you know? It bleeds, it leads. That's what it is with it. Just know that when it comes to the news, they love to sensationalize shit. So, but yeah. Anyways, that's it for this video. Like I said, if you want to leave me any comments down below, if you disagree with me, like, you know, respectful, that's fine. Otherwise, you don't have to comment. You know, that's the other thing is like, if I disagree with somebody a lot, I don't have to comment. You know, I could be like, nah, I disagree with them, but I'm not going to comment to them and be disrespectful to them because I don't want to start an argument with somebody. I don't want to fight with somebody. I just want to, you know, get along. I just want to get along with people and have happiness in my life, you know? It's such a waste to like constantly argue with somebody, you know? Anyways, to me, I consider it's just a waste of my time. You know, it's wasting my time to argue with somebody, you know? So that's why now I have it to where if somebody like disagrees with me and I feel like they're being insulting to me or like hateful toward me, I just mute them. It's just so much better to just mute the person. We're like, nope, I'm done. I don't need to converse with you anymore. So, but yeah, that's it for this video here. Not to keep fucking rambling because I love to do that, keep rambling. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourself a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I'll see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.